Hi, this is Robin Martin, and I am presenting on child abuse mandated reporting. So, the different types of child abuse, we'll start there. There's physical abuse, sexual abuse, and emotional abuse. And I'm sure you guys all know if you work in the schools, you have to take the mandated reporting class online and learn about these. So I'm not going to go over much because I think most people know about the basics of what it is. I did want to say though, 1 in 4 children experience some form of child maltreatment in their lifetimes. Um, And with emotional abuse and sexual abuse and neglect, these symptoms can be harder to see than the physical abuse. And so it's really important to be aware and have our eyes wide open. I liked this quote from the book: Maltreated children cannot be protected unless they are first identified. So let's go back. How big is the problem? Well, child abuse and neglect are common. They say at least 1 in 7 children have experienced child abuse and or neglect in the past year. But they think that this estimate is wrong, and actually one study showed 1 in 4, and I've read that in many different places. Um, the children who are at most risk are the ones that live in poverty. They experience more abuse and neglect. And the rates of child abuse and neglect are 5 times higher for children in families that are poor compared to children in families with higher socioeconomic status. And then, thirdly, child maltreatment is really costly. In the United States, the total lifetime economic burden associated with child abuse and neglect was approximately $124 billion in 2008. This burden rivals the cost of other high profile public health problems such as like stroke and type 2 diabetes. So, some signs and symptoms. Well, I'll just go through these quickly because I know you guys have heard these before, but I think they're important. So, the burns, bites, bruises, broken bones or black eyes, fading bruises or other marks noticeable after an absence from school. They seem frightened of parents, cries, they protest when time to go home. They shrink at the approach of adults. They report injury by a parent, caregiver. Some other warning signs, but these, when you see the parents and they act this way, they are conflicting, they have unconvincing arguments for injury, they contradict themselves. They can use negative words like to describe the child, like evil. They use harsh discipline. They have a history of child abuse in their own life. So CANRA is the name of the mandated child law that we have to follow. And the book goes into lots of different scenarios, and they're really good. But I wanted to make it simple. So I have 2 pages of, to me, the most important things to remember about mandated child reporting. So the report, when you make a child abuse report, that report is confidential. You do not share it with anyone. You don't need to share it with the parents, or the principal, or anyone else. The CPS workers cannot reveal anyone's name, your name on the child report. When you go to file a child abuse report, you do not need any evidence. And if you did tell your admin and the admin found out, they do not tell the parents who filed the report. In the book, there was a couple cases where the principal called the counselor in, and there were sitting the parents of the child that they made the report. And so the question was, do you have to um, confirm that you made the report? And the book says, do not confirm or deny. Because in doing so, when you tell people about the report, you actually are impeding the investigation. More on reporting. So the book says this is a black and white issue. If you hear something, you have to report. It doesn't matter who you hear it from. If students come to you and say, I heard her dad is doing this, you have to report it. It's not your job to go meet with the child or do anything else. I mean, you want to make sure she's safe in that, but you're not there to investigate, just report. You don't need to meet with the people involved in the report. This report is confidential, but the perpetrators can very easily find out that it was you, and from asking their child. And that happens a lot, it sounds like. So no, you don't have to talk to them about it. You shouldn't talk to them about it. And they can also demand that you don't see their child anymore. You don't counsel their child. So the book talks about ways to check up on the child. One of them would be just make sure that the teachers, the child has a mentor, that people are checking in with the child. You don't have to give the details, but just let them know that this child needs to be checked up on. So the book kept talking about the laws, the federal laws, and then they said, but check with your own state. And they said that several times over and over again, know your state laws. And then they would give the website. So I actually went to the website and found out what California law says. And then before I forget, because I might forget later, you can also, every school should have a safety plan on their website and a handbook if it's not on the website. Their policies for all of this should be in that handbook or in their safety plan. And so I recommend you looking through that so you know what your school believes in, and hopefully it follows these laws. So you need to call the agency, and if you make a call to report it, you have to follow up within 36 hours and make a report. If you online, a written report. So now what the new thing is, you can go online and do the report online only, and you do not have to follow up. So it's a one-time automated report. But they say be available for a follow-up call for them to call you. And then you want to report on there if the home of the child or the institution where they're at is unstable. They really want to know that information. And then let's say it's a group of counselors who know about this, or the admin and a teacher and the counselor. It says on there for the California law that as a group they can delegate a reporter, which I did not know. I thought that was interesting. So let me look at my notes here. Another thing that the California law said was, if you end up going to court and you accrue legal fees, that CPS can file a claim for you, and that the state can pay up to $50,000 in legal fees. And then also that administration cannot impede this process at all. So if your principal or vice principal tries to tell you don't make this report, or you shouldn't have done this, or whatever, they want you to meet with the parents, they cannot do that. Okay, next slide. Never ignore a report. I think that's the number one thing I learned from this is, with all those scenarios they give you, the professors give you in classes, and all the scenarios in the book, it sounds like it's gray areas, but it really is. The state law and the CANRA makes it black and white. If you hear anything at all, you need to report it. So I decided to, the other subject that I wanted to bring in for this is child trafficking. And this was a really hard subject, and I spent a long time looking at all of this, but I chose it because I feel like it's not as talked about. And I had already, I had gone to an organization and learned some things from them one time, and so I knew a little bit about it, and I wanted to learn more. So we're going to learn about child trafficking. It's the world's second largest criminal industry, and it's the fastest growing. The average age is 13. Now, we're not talking about human trafficking in general, we're talking about child trafficking, so that's under 18. 50% of the pimps come from the local area, which is so frightening to me. I wanted to read you a testimony of a former trafficked child, and I won't read it all because honestly, it's so hard to take. But I think some of us might not know very much about it, or we think that we don't really know all what it is. Maybe they're just, like regular prostitution, having sex with these people. Or I don't know what you know, but I just wanted to read this to you. Sorry. Okay, I'm looking in my notes for where this is. So this was a girl who had been, she was at the local mall, and I think she was homeless and she was starving. So this guy preyed upon her there, and after a while, this is what she says. Once he was satisfied that my training period was nearing the end, he began to refer me to quote unquote clients who would use my body for their fetishes. They paid Bruce to rent my body to rape in as many ways as they could devise without killing me. So Bruce was the guy who is her pimp, basically. He's the one who lured her in. I was held underwater in toilets or bathtubs, whipped, hung, shocked with electric current, and paid to have to tell them how much I was enjoying it. Pimps, they're not who you think they are. I think we have a stereotypical picture in our heads of what a pimp is, but they're not. They, a lot of times, especially in up nicer areas, they're high school or college guys or girls even that recruit other young people. I even read about this one case of two white high school girls that were recruiting girls and boys from elementary school. So what happens is they seek out these people who are vulnerable and they make promises to them. And then they get them out of their normal environment. They drug them and torture them, starve them, and make them start in the sex trade. And so they'll do, one transaction or whatever it is, and then they're psychologically shamed for what they did. And the pimps tell them that no one will want them now. Their parents won't want them back. Their friends won't want their boyfriend. No one will want them back because of what they've done. And that the pimp is basically their only lifestyle choice now. So I just think it's super important to become aware, have your eyes open when you're traveling, when you're on the freeways. Listen to the music that's out there and movies and TV shows. There's so much sexual talk and songs that actually propagate this kind of lifestyle, like stripping and pole dancing, and just the glorification of the sex trade is in the media and is in our culture. And it makes it seem super sexy, and it's not. It's torture. It's torturous for these people. Once again, keep your eyes open. Some common indicators: they may have an older boyfriend. They'll have signs of trauma, either physical or mental. Sometimes they've been traveling with an older male who's not their father or their guardian. And so what happens is these they'll lure them away to another state or to say they're rich and go to a really expensive party in a penthouse, and then they get on drugs, and then while they're on drugs, they do something. They sell their body under the pimp's um, to guidance, and that's how they're shamed, and the psychological abuse starts. They chronically run away from home. They're delinquent. They can be homeless. They have special tattoos. I guess the pimps brand them with these tattoos. So that would be a good thing to know, because it's like branding their property. There's substance abuse. They're not free to come and go. They're fearful that the law enforcement may be involved. And that sometimes they owe a large debt. So they think maybe this is the way to get out. And they have few possessions. They say that statistics say that over 1.68 million teens run away each year, and the majority of these teens become involved in sex trafficking. In fact, over 100,000 minors are enslaved in the sex trafficking in the U.S. each year. It's just so sad. Some other symptoms are they use even more sexualized language that is appropriate for, or I should say common in our high schools and elementary schools and middle schools. They can have expensive gifts that seem really out of place and appropriate, and trips. They'll start dressing differently. They'll skip lunch or class to meet with clients during the day. And then I just thought this quote is impactful. Students could be victims and still reporting to school. So, we have these children in our schools that they're being trafficked and they're still coming to school. So, why does this happen? Some major contributing factors. Well, age 13 is the average age. The average age. That just floors me. They've probably been abused in their background, so that makes them vulnerable. They run away from home. They're usually runaways. But lately, not so much. They're getting them in this valley. The organization I went to, the Zoe Foundation, they talked about how a lot of it happens online. And law enforcement officers, that's where they catch them too, is online. And that's where they lure them, is online. So how can you help? Well, reinforce the value and the mission of law enforcement officers. I guess that pimps and human trafficking criminals are quick to demonize law enforcement officers as the enemy. And then this prevents the victims who they're allowed into broad daylight to seek help. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but they're afraid to report. And so when they're in broad daylight and they see a cop or they see a law enforcement, they're not going to say anything because they've been brainwashed that these people are really evil. So educating youth, talking to our youth about how to report to law enforcement when they're in trouble is really important. Then provide awareness in schools. And a couple of ways that I read you can do this is the Zoe Foundation in Australia. This guy named Mark Easton has actually made up lesson plans. I did not look at them, but I'm sure there's stuff like that out there. There's also a documentary called Nefarious, which I have not seen, Nefarious Movement of Souls. So the safe harbor law is something that you can educate them in. So like I said, one of the many reasons that the victims don't report their situation to authorities is the threat of themselves being persecuted for the crimes which they did, right? Which they were forced to do. But law enforcement officers, they'll take into account that they were coerced, that they were forced, and they were victims into these illegal activities. They feel, sometimes the victims feel like they lack evidence and they're afraid that they can be prosecuted. But safe harbor laws protect victims who are 18 and under. So that's really important to know. So thank you for listening. I hope you learned something new. And here is a list of some of the references that I used besides the two books. I didn't put those in there. So thank you very much and have a good night. Bye.